Hi, it's Tappan with HeadCount. I am hanging out, waiting on Adam, who will be joining me pretty soon. I'm super excited about our live interview today. And yeah, hopefully we'll see some folks coming in here in a minute. So, I'll tell y'all what I did today while I was preparing to have this little chat. I went and I checked out my ballot. I have recently moved to Virginia, so it's my first big election since I've been here. And I found that I really don't understand how my county elections work. So I spent about an hour today digging into that to get ready to vote tomorrow. So I highly recommend that everybody do that and check it out. Make sure you're ready to go to the polls. You can do that at headcount.org. Okay. I am waiting to see here. Hopefully we'll have the right person join soon. Let's see what we have here. Oh wow, we've got quite a crowd. I'm excited to have so many people here for our chat. We're hitting 3 o'clock now. All right. So I have to admit, I'm not awesome at this, but I believe that I just got Adam in. Adam, are you there? Yes, it worked. Hi.
Hello, how's it going?
It's good. I understand that you are much more adept at the Instagram Live than I am, having done many of these series. I'm normally the person who gets invited in. I think it's the first time I've ever initiated. So
Well, you're doing great. You're doing great.
thank you. I'm Tappan. I'm with HeadCount. I'm so excited to be talking with you today.
Me
HeadCount
too.
World, if you don't already know Adam, this is Adam Met from AJR, also the founder and executive director of your own nonprofit, correct? Planet
Yes.
Reimagined, which I had a great time exploring the website today. Um,
Amazing.
yeah. So before I get into the fun questions that we have prepared, I just want to point out that it's 3 o'clock and we're talking politics. I don't know if that was
Yes.
intentional when your team picked this time, but I did was like listening to some music to prepare this morning and I was like, oh man, that's crazy.
It is crazy. It's actually a coincidence, but also we have so many songs that relate to 3 o'clock that maybe it was just meant to be.
It must be. It must
Yeah.
be. It's
Yeah.
a good time. Well, I was, like I said, checking out Planet Reimagined today, and I thought that I would go straight into one of our heavier questions because it was really inspirational to see your work. And I'm wondering if you might share with us who or what inspired you to be involved in democracy and speak out about issues that you care about.
That's a great question. I travel around the world a lot, obviously, as a musician. But at the same time, I've stayed in school since, I was really young. And when I was in high school, surprisingly, they offered a human rights class in my high school, which is pretty unique. And it really stuck with me since then. I studied, human rights when I was a senior in high school, and then I continued on and I studied sustainability, and then I studied constitutional law, and then I went on to do a PhD in human rights law, kind of doing a full circle. And all these different parts of how our society works are only going to continue to work if we have democratic institutions to help support them. So voting and what we're talking about today is so central to everything in our society functioning properly, from our education system to healthcare to our environment. So I know we're going to talk a lot about voting today, but it is so unbelievably important.
It is. I couldn't agree more. So I have some questions that are really voting focused, and one of them is to really hear from you if you think there's a reason why young voters don't turn out when we have so many stakes that you just described. Like, do you have a sense
Yeah.
of what apathy is out there?
So the first thing I want to say is that we had the largest youth voter turnout ever in the last election. So while I agree with you that we need more young people to turn out, I also want to celebrate the win that we had in terms of getting young people out in the last election. Also, for the election that's happening tomorrow, and I hope a lot of people voted early, but for the election that's happening tomorrow, we have the largest number of young people registering to vote for this election than we've had in history. So I want to start out on the positive note, saying that young people are more engaged than ever. And there are also more young people running for seats at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level than ever before. One of my friends, his name is Maxwell Frost. He won the primary in Florida, and if he wins in the general tomorrow, he will be the first Gen Z member of Congress. So we're starting to see more young people being represented, and I think that's why more young people are coming out to vote, because they see themselves represented. They see their voice being heard, and they see people just like themselves representing in places like Congress, in state legislatures, even in places like school boards. But to get to kind of the core of your question, I think there are certain people in this country who want to spread the word that your vote doesn't count and that your vote doesn't matter. And I think that's one of the big problems. It's a messaging problem that your vote might not count. And that could be for a whole bunch of reasons. That could be because polling places have been shut down, whether it's due to COVID or to really problematic gerrymandering laws. But I think that when we talk about your vote counting, I think for everybody, it should be a point of pride. I know for me, at least, it's a point of pride when I go into the voting booth and can say, I have the opportunity to vote, especially in this midterm, not only for the people who are going to represent me, but I have the ability to vote directly for the policies that matter to me most. I'm in New York, and there are 4 propositions on the ballot. And one of the things that a lot of young people don't realize is that you're not just voting for somebody who's going to end up voting for policies. You get to vote for policies for yourselves. And one of the best examples is that after the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court, in Kansas, there was a proposition on the ballot, and overwhelmingly, the community came out and said, we are traditionally a red state, but we want to make sure that we support a woman's right to choose. And that was directly coming from the people. That wasn't representative democracy. That was democracy in action. So I
Yeah,
know I've said many different things, and I got off your question about young people, but
no, it's
I
all
have a
right.
lot to say.
It's all right. Those are actually normally my talking points, so it's really great to hear someone else use them, to be honest, and with so much passion and understanding. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think there are actually 100, I just counted, and I believe that there are 136 or 34 state ballot initiatives on this election. Which is really exciting because it's everything as from access to abortion to environmental issues, workers' rights, even like the abolition of chattel slavery in places where it still has never been amended. And I think that flipping your ballot over and using your voice at the end is one of the most powerful things that you can do. But it's hard to get people to flip those ballots over or go all the way to the end sometimes. So I think that, preparing and understanding what those ballot initiatives mean is super important. Do you have any resources or ways that you like to prepare to learn about those ballot initiatives?
It's a great question, and it's something I think about a lot. And for a lot of people who are watching right now, and for a lot of people who use social media, there are resources online where you could read the ballot initiative itself, but a lot of people trust other people to tell them what's on the ballot and what they should be voting for. And, I fully recognize that I am one of those people that some people trust to tell them this is a really strong ballot initiative. And, I'm in New York, and there are 4 on the ballot right now. One of them is environmental initiative, and it's about instituting a bond, which basically means they're going to sell a bond in New York to make sure that they can afford to pay for environmental resilience measures. There's no increased taxes, there's no additional money. And as as simply and easily as I could explain that, that's how most people find out about what a proposition on a ballot means. So I think when you're on social media, finding the people who are explaining these things simply and effectively is how most people are going to find out how they should be voting on a proposition. Of course, everyone should and is welcome to do their own research, and there are a lot of resources online. I mean, even to just figure out if you're registered, where your polling place is. I use vote.org because it's really simple and really easy. But even if you just say, like, I'm in New York City, what propositions are on the ballot? The first thing that comes up is a list of the 4 propositions, and it
Right.
tells me what I need to about. You don't need to remember a website. You don't need to remember anything. Just Google it.
I think that that's right. And I think one of the things that's, first of all, you can find all that information at headcount.org too. But vote.org are our
Perfect.
partners, so there's no competition there. But I would also say I think sometimes like the ballot initiatives can be written in a way that's very confusing, and
Yeah.
you feel, I think part of the reason why people don't always vote on them is that they feel like a little bit like not sure they understand what it means. So I think that you're
Yeah.
right. Spending a little time going to trusted sources, reading it on your own is a really important way to prepare. This was not on my list of questions. I'm sorry. I get really excited about ballot initiatives. So I will get back to some other things. So specifically, we've talked a lot about early voting and hoping that people have already gone out. I'm wondering if there are changes that you'd like to see in the voting space or in our American democracy to increase voter participation and access.
Yes. A
Do you
lot.
have any specific examples?
Yes. So some states now allow you to register on the day of the election. And I think we should make that happen in every state. Actually, there are some states, I can't remember how many there are right now, but there are some states that pre-register you to be a voter. And I think that's something that every state needs to do. Um, Voting is a right of yours, and there shouldn't be any blocks to you voting, whether it's getting an absentee ballot, getting a mail-in ballot, knowing where your voting place is, having it be too far away or the lines too long. I think all of those are things we need to address, but I think the number one most important thing is that everybody, as soon as they turn 18, should be automatically registered to vote. And that brings to my second point that I think is the most important. Young people now are the most educated generation. And when I say young people, people as young as in high school are the most educated generation that we've had. And when I say educated, I don't necessarily mean what they're learning in school. Because of their access to so many different types of resources, they know far more than I did when I was their age, when I was 16. So I think lowering the voting age to 16 would be an incredible benefit to having democracy actually be representative, represent the people who are actually, the decisions are actually being made for. In something like climate, we're making the decisions right now that are going to be affecting people for generations, and those people should have a say in the decisions that are being made today.
I think that's really interesting. There are places where they've looked locally into lowering the voting age to 16. And we do, you can actually go to our website and see, think you're too young to register. If you Google that, it'll show all the pre-registrations laws and states. And then there's automatic voter registration, which you also discussed. So to be a little bit heady in response to that, it's actually really interesting what we learned in 2020. And I support, automatic voter registration generally, because anything that gets people to the polls matters. But we learned that if you actually go and intentionally register to vote, it's the first step in the get out the vote process. And that intentionality often turns people into voters more than automatic voter registration because they realize that they're registered. And one of the things that we do is we go out and we get people to verify their status because we can't register everybody at concerts, right? And so when people sometimes verify their status with us, they're like, oh, I didn't know I was registered. And then we get to have a really cool conversation with them about automatic voter registration. But I do think that there's an intentionality in becoming an active citizen and becoming an active voter that's like a really important part of what you're discussing, especially for young voters. Because what I've found is that young voters overwhelmingly are independent, and they're not like black or white, or like they don't have the same sort of duality that like we've experienced in our society. They're much more dynamic, and they're great thinkers. And so I'm really excited to see what happens. And so I don't really have a question there, but do you have thoughts about the intentionality of becoming a voter versus like automatically becoming a voter?
Yeah, no, it's a good point because I think that on-ramp to voting of that registration process is an important one because it is educational in and of itself. And I completely see the point that you're making. I have a question for you
Okay,
about partisanship in voting because HeadCount is a nonpartisan organization,
correct.
and nonpartisan means that you're not affiliated with any party. However, at the moment, there are a lot of partisan initiatives that are trying to prevent people from voting. So I'm curious how HeadCount reconciles with that issue.
Well, there's various ways that you can talk about partisanship, right? There's the legal definition, which you
Of
just
course.
described exactly. Like, we don't support a candidate or a party. We never tell people how to register or how to vote. We actually take it a step farther a lot of the times and try to create a space where everyone knows that they are welcome. The one
Mm.
place where we really lean in is democracy and access to elections. We believe that elections should be fair, accessible, and trustworthy for all voters. And in 2021, we ran a Save the Vote campaign, which was a direct legislative action campaign where we went to state and federal officials to promote um, public awareness around the kind of regression to democracy that we are seeing through voting bills. And we've continued to do that. We just got done being in Georgia, passing out water everywhere but 150 feet of polling sites to support making sure
Uh-huh.
people are hydrated when they're voting. So this is an
Yeah,
area where we lean in because we ultimately believe in democracy, which means we can't let it be partisan, even if the national narrative is trying to push us that way.
that makes so much sense. And speaking of democracy and representative democracy, I want to share a couple of things that people might not know. Um, when we're voting in this election, we're voting for a variety of different types of offices, but those members of let's say the Senate, for example, those members of the Senate that we're voting for right now make decisions about things that end up going back all the way around and affecting your individual right to vote. So the Senate gets to decide not only on Supreme Court justices, but also they get to decide on justices in every other court in this country. What that means is that local courts and state courts that are deciding on what your district looks like, where your voting polls, where your polls are, that's all decided by your vote right now. And there's a case in front of the Supreme Court this year that could put a lot more power into the states in terms of deciding how voting happens for locally for you. So as you think about your vote, what you're voting for in this midterm election is actually kind of meta because you're voting for your ability to vote when you vote. And I know that's a weird way of thinking about it, but I just want to make sure people realize that it's not just about the person that you're voting for. Yeah, you could like somebody because they have a really good attitude, or you agree with their policies, or any number of things. But when you think about the far-reaching results that your vote has, it could end up coming down to a few hundred people deciding whether an election is called at the state level or at the federal level. And I think that's something really important to just remember as you're going into the voting booth.
Absolutely. There's no question that democracy is on the ballot, especially if you're in a state with a Secretary of State's race on your ballot as well. So I encourage
Yes.
you to pay attention to those as well. Well,
Yeah.
I think our time is up. We went a little over, but I had a great time. Thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us.
No, thank you. And I hope everyone who's watching has a plan to vote. And if they haven't voted already, that they're going to vote tomorrow and telling all their friends and their family to come with them to go vote.
That's right. Have a great day.
Amazing.
Bye.
Bye.